Hello, 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 Mr. Watts and Miss Lobo. Thank you for gathering with us here today for this Anytown virtual town hall. It's great to be in the presence of former Anytowners and to have these conversations with you.
I think, as you all know, my name is Skylar. This is Sanaya. We will be the co-moderators for this Anytown Town Hall. We have some opening remarks, a question just to kind of get the ball rolling and talk about the things that have been happening in our country and what we want to do about it, how we're feeling, all of those things. So just to jump right into it, my question for both of you is, have these past 2 weeks made you evaluate your positions as community leaders and why?
All right, who would you like to have start first?
It doesn't matter.
I'll go first.
And please introduce yourselves as well, what you do and kind of like how you got here. Yeah.
Sure, yeah. I might need to be reminded of the question. My name is Adrian Lobo, and I am a local criminal defense attorney in town. I've been an attorney practicing in this state for the past 14 years. I've only done criminal defense, and in 1997, I went to Camp Anytown when I was 16 years old. I'm sorry, it was 96, and I went to Camp Anytown. And if any of you guys, some of you guys look pretty young, but I know there's a variety of ages on this call. I went to Anytown when Shannon West and Tyrone Thompson were the directors a very long time ago, and I know they were Anytown alum, and I'm happy to be part of this call and this dialogue. Obviously, Anytown runs deep in my blood and in my veins, because obviously, like, I became an attorney because of Anytown and because of the people who I met. I think the law is a very powerful tool, and that's why I became an attorney. So it's work like this and creating change and community activism and connecting with people and making sure that voices are heard that are often not heard, and that I am lending whatever microphone I can to those sorts of people to make sure that the average person has their voice heard when they're in a situation where they're essentially fighting for their life against the government. So absolutely, this is important to me. I believe that Skylar's question was, how has the past few weeks affected me? Man, I mean, well, it's been intense, very emotionally intense, sad, devastating, disgusting, but uplifting to see all of you and to see that across the country, people appear to be awake, and they appear to be hungry for information and hungry for things to do. And so that's what I want to provide for you guys, is kind of answer questions, because I think it's important that every single person who is a citizen, I don't care what you do for a living, and this isn't something that's reserved for the educated or whatever box, like you're looking to be like, oh, well, they've got it checked out, you know, so we're good. I think that we can all say that things have not worked as the way they should, and it's time for everybody to tune in and start making sure that government is accountable for the, you know, the responsibilities that have been entrusted to them, because thus far it appears to be happening, and no other place is it so widely on display as it is in the criminal justice system. So it's been up and down. I hope that the beauty of all of this is that we absolutely emerge from this better people, better citizens, better communities, being more loving and compassionate and kind towards each other. I'll pass it to Howard now.
All right, thank you. It's great to be here, everybody. My name is Howard Watts. My pronouns are he, him, his. I first volunteered for Camp Anytown in 2007 when I met Rico, and he was a delegate. And I lost count of how many camps I did. It was more than 10. And it's great to be here with you all today. I was elected to the Nevada Assembly, which is one of the two houses of the Nevada legislature, in 2018. I represent District 15, which is kind of in the central east part of town. It's got kind of like East Las Vegas Community Center, Boulder Station, and the two high schools that are in the district are Valley and Chaparral. So that's kind of the area that I represent in the legislature. Before I was elected, I worked a long time. I loved volunteering for camp. I got involved really early on in the nonprofits and started doing advocacy and activism, and worked for a group called the Progressive Leadership Alliance of Nevada, or PLAN, making sure that I was going out into the community to educate people about our election process and all the different things that are on the ballot, and making sure people had the information that they needed so that they could exercise the right to vote. And then also letting people know about different things that were going on at our local government, our state government, and our federal government, and how people could make their voices heard and their opinions heard on issues that matter to them. So that is kind of what led me to want to be an elected representative in the state. And oh man, the last couple of weeks, and honestly the last couple of months, have been really overwhelming as an elected official. Dealing with global pandemic. Not only are people all over the community at risk, my dad hasn't really left his house since this all started because he's at very high risk. But I started talking to a lot of people who had lost their jobs, who were struggling to not only pay bills, but just meet the basics with food, and trying to help meet those needs. And then on top of that, to have the events of the last couple of weeks unfold has been really difficult, because I remember kind of the last big surge of the Black Lives Matter movement. I actually was at a conference, and we in St. Louis, and we did an action where we blocked off traffic on half of one of the major freeways through St. Louis. And just realizing that 4 years have passed since then, and here we are with the exact same incidents happening, and they've been happening. And also remembering what happened here about 10 years ago with just a string of officer involved shootings and excessive use of force. And I think the fact that there hasn't been as much, and that in the legislature we were working on some criminal justice reform policies, I think I even got into my own head that we're making a lot of progress. And I think the events of the last 2 weeks have shown how far we really have to come, and how far we have to go. So it's been a really heavy time, but it is also, I think, given me focus about the work that needs to be done, and the level of engagement and some of the allyship that we're seeing is really inspiring. So I'm optimistic too that we can use this moment that's really painful to improve our community and take on some of these systems of oppression that have made themselves so clear to so many people, even though they're ongoing all the time. So glad to be part of the conversation.
Thank you for that. Can you give some examples as to what you've been doing to help your community through this time?
Sure. Well, in general, like I said, I've been really focused on helping people meet basic needs. So a lot of people have been having issues with unemployment. So I've been working with some of our state staff to try and make sure that people's unemployment claims are being raised and being addressed. There's been a huge backlog, and just trying to keep up with what's changing and what phone numbers people need to call and what folks need to do. I've been spending a lot of time on that, and trying to help folks by distributing food, by distributing face masks early on. So I spent a lot of time doing that. In this moment, and with the issues that we're dealing with now, one of the main things that I wanted to do was just make sure that people know that I am with them and have their support. I have not been on the streets. Again, I've got family and that are at risk, and so that's something that I have not made that decision to do that. But I want to make sure that people know that as a policymaker, I have their support, and I've been starting to get some more emails, and what I'm really trying to do is dig in as much on what do we do in terms of changing laws that can help address these issues. So I've been doing a mix of studying and listening, right? So really learning what are the realities of what's happening, and what are some of the policy changes that we can make to address that. And I think Adrian will also discuss how just because we get the words on paper in the law doesn't mean that the work is over. So also trying to figure out, in my role as a representative, how do we make sure that the law is followed? And I think that's a bigger thing that involves even more people. So that's kind of where my focus has been.
Did you want to add on to that, Adrian?
Sure, I'll add on a little bit. So the way I think that I have been helping people, I would say particularly with this, has been, I think that the most important thing that we can do, and especially for all of the Black brothers and sisters that I have that are affected by this, is reaching out to them and just being there to talk and to listen and to hear what they have to say, and to just listen to that and take it in without trying to, analogize it to my situation, because I'm not, or trying to, figure out a way, or saying that it's going to be okay when there's just so much pain and trauma surrounding all of it, because it is such a unreal thing. And it's, disheartening that you feel like, I thought we were past this, and some of you guys are too young, but like, I remember the Rodney King riots, like vividly in my head. I remember when, the first Black man was shot here in the back of the head by Metro 10 years ago while he was just sitting in his car, and he was a military veteran. I remember a lot of these things and thought that, progress has been made. And, I know I, became a criminal defense attorney so I could help people, right? And I could give them that voice. And I go into court every single day and I fight these fights. And, I'm met with either resistance by prosecutors. I'm met with a very cavalier attitude by judges who seek endorsements from prosecutors and from police unions and readily want those campaign contributions, even though there's a huge glaring conflict of interest. So I would say, besides listening, being there for people is figuring out ways that I can serve, right? How can I step up, and how can I expand in a space of love and service and compassion for what's happening? So a couple of things. One, most important, is to further educate myself. I think that the duty to be, informed is apparent and so necessary right now, because once you get into rooms, or whether it's a courtroom or a task force or a committee meeting or just even a community planning organization, if you finally get people in the room who are going to listen and who want to hear what you have to say, you have to know your stuff very well. And then you also need to know is the people that are in the room, can they really actually effectuate the change? Like, do you have the proper stakeholders? So doing like more research and data collection on that, in particular, how it pertains to body cam, is one of my issues that I'm struggling with all the time. So that's one way. The other way is, I did it because, out of the kindness of my heart and it being the right thing to do, to represent protesters pro bono to protect constitutional rights. However, I did not expect the onslaught of the days of protest or the hundreds of people that would need help, or what I'm seeing now is the brutality being inflicted upon people who are exercising their constitutional rights. That's the way I've been serving. So more learning, more growing, more expanding, and just more compassion overall in general, and thinking of ways that I can help, whether it's all of you guys mobilize or give you information, because a lot of people don't really understand how the criminal justice system works. It's not the way it appears to be in a movie, obviously, unless it's like a documentary or something of that nature, but even then it's editing, right? So is telling you what every American needs to know, like what your rights are and what the Constitution guarantees you. When you have a normal interaction with the police on the street, what do you have to provide them? What happens like at the arrest stage? And then like what happens in the litigation phases of this? So I see the breakdown at multi-levels. Like it's laughable in my opinion that Donald Trump, or whoever it was, William Barr, I think, who said that there's no systemic racism. I mean, well, I'm sure maybe sitting in your ivory tower over there doesn't look like it, but I can tell you there is, from this point of view where I'm sitting and what I see every single day.
So, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. No, I'm fine. I'm finished.
Coming from a question from the audience, their question is, in a world where we are seeing a new wave of reconstruction in this country, how high is too high, in your opinion? And do you think there is a path to abolition? If not, what are you doing to get close to that? And that is posed to both Ms. Lobo and Mr. Watts.
Can you repeat that question really quick?
Sure. In a world where we are seeing a new wave of reconstruction in this country, how high is too high? Do you think there is a path to abolition? If not, what are you doing to get close to this?
That's a good question. What I would say is, I think abolition is something that is worth discussing, and I think it's an important vision. I think one of the things that we need at this moment in time is bold visions for what our community can and should look like. Minneapolis is in the process of taking a vote to disband their current police department and reconstitute a more community-oriented policing system. And I think it still remains to be seen what the composition of that is like. But I think that it's helpful to put out ideas like that, like defunding and shifting resources away from the police department towards other services and needs that our community has that can help lift people up. As far as what the path looks like right now, I think it's not an easy one. I think that is difficult, but I think it's worth putting out there because there's a whole range of things that can and should be done. And if we just start by talking about only the small incremental policy changes without looking at a broader vision for what policing or what justice looks like in our community, I think that we're not going to get close to the outcomes that we want. So I would just encourage people to continue to put those ideas out there, and again, to look at a bigger vision for what does what does justice and accountability look like in our community, and kind of re-envisioning broadly what that looks like. And then, does that mean abolishing? Does it mean dramatically restructuring? I think there's lots of different options for what it can look like, but I think it's really important in those conversations to start with that vision of how we want to treat each other, how we want to be treated, how we want those interactions to look, and start there, because that's really what we need to work on. There's policy change, but there's also major cultural issues that are tied up in all of this. And I think putting out some of those bold ideas and those visions helps us lift up the fact that we need a cultural change in essentially how people are treating other people.
And the second part of this is, what are you doing to get close to this goal?
Again, I think what it comes back to is I'm looking at all the different policies that are available, especially at the state level right now. So there's been a bill that has been introduced in Congress that looks to make a series of reforms. So I'm trying to see some of those are really have to be led by the state, or could be led by the state, because it's pretty difficult to get laws passed in Washington, D.C. right now. So I'm looking at all the different components that could provide accountability. And that's everything from within the existing structure of use of force policies and data collection and all kinds of other things that help create accountability. And as well as looking at what are some of the mechanisms that would shift resources or reconfigure some of the structures that we currently have.
So I will go ahead and just add a little bit onto that. So by abolition, and I don't know if the question was dealing with abolition of the police. Is that what? Yes. Okay. So, wow. Okay. So I have thought about that. But before I answer that and envision more broad goal, I think that one of the things like where it needs to be identified is that there is a big, huge disconnect, right? For community policing. People want, and the police especially right now, want to regain trust. And, call me, it's not even a cynic, because I base this on my experiences. It is a PR and it is a marketing ploy. I mean, they're taking a knee and they're walking with people, because how are they not? I think that they're for the first time realizing that power to the people, of the people, by the people, that it could turn very quickly dangerous and anarchist, right? If they don't hear us out. And so your mighty voices have been heard. And I think that you have the ability to affect great change in a way that maybe I can't. Yes, I do have an education and I can get into courtrooms and fight the always fight, but it's one thing to see, people who are young and who are interested in this and want to participate. So I don't think it's too far off, and there's no idea that is too big. And we need people with big vision and big ideas and tall orders, because that's the only way we're going to get out of this. So there's two things. Like, one is the way that people are treated by police. If you are calling the police and you are the victim of a crime, I can say, at least for the majority, and I won't say every single time, because I've had experiences and heard of experiences where it is not pleasant, even if you are the victim who is calling and phoning for their help. I can tell you that they want that to be the mentality. But one of the things is that Black people in this country have been in a situation, and the criminal justice system was created obviously after the Reconstructionist era and the ending of slavery, right? And so it was a way to keep, slaves in check and to also keep the labor force going in this country. So that is the root of where we're beginning, right? And so what has happened along the way is funding, quotas, and arrests have driven budgets and prioritize that. So they over police Black communities and brown communities, expecting to find people there that are committing more crimes. And that is not true. I know that white people, any other race, commits crimes just the same way anybody else does. So why is it that there's this big, huge, glaring disparity in the American prison systems, right? It's obviously because there's a disproportionate impact in the way that they're policing. So make no mistake, if they are saying they want to help you, there are some officers who I genuinely believe want to, and they just don't know how to, because this is such an overwhelming task. But one of the things is like, make no mistake that when they see you, and if you are a Black or brown person, their default immediately is that you are the defendant and you are a suspect, and they are going to question you because it is their job to solve crimes. And so that is the reality that we're facing now, is that they approach the situation believing through the lens in which they see the world, which I don't blame them. They see horrible things, but they're seeing people that they believe have committed a crime, and they're making mass arrests. And so that stereotype, as we all know, right, is transposed and imposed on every single person without proper investigation or curiosity or transparency. There is tremendous pressure on the police to close out the cases immediately, to get it solved and move on. And they'll tell you sometimes, no, there really isn't. Well, then I don't know why you're not getting things correct a lot of the time. So that's one thing. So they're acknowledging the duality that exists is the problem, right? Because they're saying we want to, be there for you, right, to serve and to protect, but then they're prosecuting you on the other side in mass numbers and droves. So it appears as though your vision is not aligned with your actions, or your investigation is lacking, right? And so it seems very disingenuous from my point of view when I see them saying certain things that sound like great PR tidbits on TV, because it's not the reality that is reflected in a courtroom that I see every single day. So as to the question about getting them to stop taking police endorsements, and like the district attorney's office and judges, right? That's a huge deal. I don't think that it's impossible, but it require organization, mobilization. And I know that Rico and Howard had spoken about different ways, and we're going to talk about that like later on. I don't think it's without a problem to say that that's something that can be done. The turning off of the body cam, the muting the body cam. How about the kid who was killed, Mr. Gomez, whoever he was, like, that they weren't wearing body cam at all. And this is a common occurrence in my profession. They're not wearing it, or they mute it, or they turn it off, or if they do have it, they destroy it. So a lot of these things are real deal things that I'm dealing with and litigating in case every single day. Now, getting a judge who's beholden to the police to get them to find in my favor, or to be truly accountable and objective, is problematic, right? On so many fronts, because they don't want to, obviously, forgive me, but piss off like the person who's like, put them in office, right? Which is an issue. And, why I believe like, if they won't agree to stop doing it, in my opinion, they all need to be appointed. I know that invites a whole nother host of problems, but at least we won't have this pandering to the public like we're seeing right now with the primaries that just happened, right? I was very concerned about one race, and thankfully I don't think he's getting out of the primary. So we can all like take a deep breath. That one predatory prosecutor, there's one less in Clark County that's going to make it to the bench. Thank God. And then I think the other thing is, like, besides of the body cam, I think that one of the other things that you had asked was body cam, police contributions. I will talk about that. I plan on putting out like some form letters and they'll be in my link tree, probably on Instagram. And I'm trying to figure out the best way to do that. I believe that we probably should get started on some sort of letter writing campaign that would need to be deployed strategically. I think that there needs to be multiple facets. You guys are definitely wanting to help out and contribute. So you're on this call for a reason, and we need to be organized and diligent. I know that this is just a first one, and Rico and I know we'll talk and set something up later, but I'll hold off at least on that. So I don't think anything is too tall. And to what I can say about big vision and what a new vision of justice looks like, I'll even share this with you guys. This is like a new download last night that was just like imparted to me by one of my best friends who's Black and is an attorney in California, who we obviously have been friends for many, many years. Is there is a problem with the personnel files obviously being turned over. If a defense attorney had access to those things immediately, I would file a motion. I would say we need to look at this person's, personnel file and see if, what would happen. Like, is there any bad information that's there? Because there's a lot of times, like, obviously my client has priors and they say they beat me up, right? Which happens a lot in my profession. They're not believed. And the judge just categorically says, well, you haven't made a proper showing, Ms. Lobo, of proof. Right? And so that's an issue that there's, an area of the law. I don't even think I should be having to require a showing of proof. So vision, I think that the entire system that was predicated on slavery needs to be abolished. I mean, we need to start over radically. One of the huge disparities last night that we spoke about is that, does everybody know what like the difference between a civil and a criminal case is? If you guys can shake your head yes or no. I see lots of yeses. Yes. Okay. So civil's like, I'm going to sue you. I got into a car accident. I'm going to sue you for money, right? Or you fired me from my job wrongfully. I'm suing you for all my back owed pay. Criminal is effectuated by law enforcement, right? FBI, DEA, DHS, Metro, whatever it is. So that's kind of like the full gambit. The reason I'm bringing that up is because in the civil side of things, right, which obviously was developed because we were founded on British law. I didn't mean for this to be a history lesson, but you can see I'm pretty nerdy. So one of the things is that civil law is obviously was founded first, and that was first in time, and it's the way of the crown and the way money was handed out. So when you sue now, but not in the British crown, but you get access to evidence, you get access to discovery easy. It is given over to you freely. I can say, hey, answer these questions, bring me these records right now, and I'll review them. In a criminal case, there's a big, huge problem. I have to go ask the prosecutor for the evidence, right? That's a huge problem because as a prosecutor, they want to win their case. They're advocating on behalf of the state and public safety to keep us all safe. But there's a problem if they are just seeking a conviction, right? And let's be real, they're attorneys, they want to win. There's nothing wrong with that. I think we have charged them with some, like, a duty that is like antithetical to the entire human experience of competition and winning. And so I think that a dramatic overhaul of the entire system is necessary. Now, do I have all the kinks worked out? No, I do not yet. But we're starting to think in that direction earlier. And so, it was always why. I would walk into court and be like, why can't I get this? And just frustrated, with how horrible and ugly the system can be and how it can treat people, less than humans. Because in order to treat people like this, I think everybody needs to know they are not seeing Black and brown people, Black people particularly, like they're not seeing them as humans, because if you did, you could not do this. And so that is a problem and an issue. And I think we're seeing it erupt all over the TV screens right now where, the guy who was pushed down, the 70-year-old something man, there was one officer in that line who wanted to go back and help. And he immediately, it was his knee-jerk reaction to do that. And he was shoved out of the way. I mean, there's a problem with that. I mean, I guess there can be 1,000 arguments. Well, you could have had a bomb. You could have had this or that or whatever. there's a problem and we don't trust each other. And so the only way to rebuild a relationship that's been damaged, like if your boyfriend or your boo or whoever had cheated on you, you wouldn't be like, oh, okay, I just trust you so willingly and freely after, I've been in this abusive relationship with you. After 401 years of arriving in this country involuntarily, there's never been an acknowledgement, and there's never been any sort of real healing and talking about the ways in which we need to accomplish that. So what I envision is a dramatic overhaul of like the way evidence is turned over. And we need to be very careful and mindful that police are not, or others who do not support this movement are not talking about, that this is anti-victim and that, we are pro-criminal defense. I'm really sick of that being the tone and tenor. And we need to be thinking about it that criminal defense attorneys are the people who protect constitutional rights every single day. And we need to be looking at it through that lens. And maybe if we had been looking at it through that way, we wouldn't be in the situation that we're currently facing right now, because judges don't want to side or say, hey, I have the defense bar's endorsement. Well, why not? Aren't we all after the truth? I mean, aren't we really? Because if the police do their job, right, I'm supposed to lose, right? I mean, why do I keep winning? Why do I have a hallway full of not guilties? It's because I can exploit all of their corruption and their laziness, which is like an issue and a problem, right? I mean, so instead of getting better at their job and doing things the right way, they've taken another approach and started backdooring the things they want to accomplish. So stay tuned for the vision, but it is coming. So I'll stop talking now.
That was a great response. I'd like to move on to our next question that came from Instagram of our audience, and they said, Nevada Attorney General Aaron Ford recently stated if the Department of Justice doesn't extend the power to investigate alleged misconduct by local police departments, that he would request that the state legislature intervene to give his office that power. And this is for Assemblyman Howard Watts. Can you break down what this means and also let us know if you support the Attorney General?
Yes, let me start with the second part of the question, which is yes, I absolutely support that. And I'll actually probably turn it over to Adrian to discuss a little bit more about what that means. But I also did see some of the questions that have been raised in the chat that also had to do with legislation. So if it's okay, I'll spend just a minute or two answering a couple of those other legislative related questions. So one was about any law that could restrict police union contributions or endorsements. Endorsements becomes very difficult because it's a free speech issue in terms of any group saying who they support for different offices. Contributions is a really interesting one. And, there are issues that need to be remedied with our entire election system and how it works, and the amount of money that is needed to campaign and where it comes from. And there's a lot of different ideas for that, including public financing, where essentially we would gather a pool of funding, and then candidates for offices would actually go and get support and signatures from voters in the area, in whatever area they're representing. And if they get to a certain amount, then they would qualify for a certain amount of this public funding that they wouldn't then have to raise. And they could use that to do their campaigning to help get their message out to people. You can do it that way. You can also do it by raising grassroots contributions that have to be under a certain amount. So instead of the incentive to raise money from large companies and groups that have a lot of money, this then encourages you to raise money from community members and build those connections. And once you have a certain amount raised, again, you get additional funding that can support your race. So this is something that we could look at bigger picture, but I think it could actually be interesting to talk about that in the scope of judicial candidates. it is very difficult when they are seeking support from some of these different unions and also lawyers, right? The folks that have the most interest in the outcomes that judges produce are the ones that are funding their campaigns, and that there's always going to be an issue with that. So that's an idea of how we could reshape kind of the contribution system and put it on a more level playing field. And then there's also a couple questions about body cams. And Attorney General Ford, when he was in the legislature, actually helped put forward the original body cam bill that established body cams as kind of a standard throughout the state. Unfortunately, at the time, there was a lot of back and forth on it, and so there were a lot of basically loopholes. So it's difficult to, if it's muted, if it's turned off, if it's tampered with, there's no requirement for people to be disciplined for that. So that's something that, no matter what happens, you can have a serially faulty body cam. Oops, I forgot to turn it on or turn it back on after it was off, or anything like that. If you had a kind of required escalating discipline policy on that, then you wouldn't be able to have those patterns. So that's something that we could look at. Another thing we need to do is look at just changing the policy in general to make it stronger. So one of the things that Adrian mentioned was the young man that was shot and killed a few days ago. None of the officers involved in that incident had body cams. One of the reasons is because they pulled people who are not normally on the street, detectives and other officers, onto the street for the protests. And so they didn't have body cams normally assigned to them. So does somebody necessarily need to wear a body cam when they're sitting in Metro, working on paperwork? No. But should we make sure that they have a body cam anytime they're going out into the street and interacting with people? I think so. I think that's completely reasonable. And the other issue that I'll bring up that was involved with an incident earlier, when a man was taken into custody. Basically, the requirement is that the cameras have to be on until the end of the incident. So this man was taken into custody. He was complaining that he couldn't breathe, and they had him handcuffed. And then they turned off all of their cameras because they considered the encounter over. And he turned them back on 20 minutes later as he was being loaded into an ambulance, completely non-responsive. And so we don't know what happened in that span of time. So those are some things that we could look at in terms of strengthening those policies at the state level to create more transparency and accountability. And that's kind of some of the areas where those policies are weak right now. And then with that, I'd love to turn it over to Adrian to discuss a little bit more about the specific issue that was raised in the question.
There's one more, if that's specifically addressed to Ms. Lobo, if you can add on to it. From Instagram, one person wrote, the Minneapolis Police Department confirmed that Derek Chauvin, the officer involved in killing George Floyd, confirmed he had 18 prior complaints against him, but the Minneapolis Police Department didn't detail why they were filed or what they entailed. And they don't understand how police officers patrol the streets of Minneapolis with 18 prior complaints. They said it feels like we're up against the entire system, and how do we mount a fight with equal force? And I can go over those questions if you need.
Yeah, I might need you to repeat them. There's lots that I want to comment upon. So first, to Aaron Ford with taking that step. What a courageous, appropriate thing to do. We're a system. One of the beautiful things, if the laws were actually enforced equally and there was really justice for all and it was colorblind, it is beautiful, but it's only as good as the people that are in the positions that are making the decisions, and as good as, as we all are. And there's so much work to be done on an individual level, but on a systemic level, I think that this is amazing. It's great that we're putting up, more checks and balances, because usually, right, if I have an issue with the police, you call internal affairs, you lodge a complaint, or you get a result from your investigation. Citizen review boards don't have any teeth, at least in this county. They have no teeth. You can go and complain there, but they can't enforce anything. Or you can take up the denial of an IAB, an Internal Affairs Bureau complaint, with the Citizens Review Board, or you can go there first. But the problem is they don't have any sort of like real teeth behind what they're doing. So it's always best to go to IAB if you do have a situation with law enforcement and it's not pleasant. So that's one thing. I think it's great. Part and parcel of the police misconduct, though, you cannot address the police misconduct that we're seeing right now without addressing the prosecutorial misconduct that occurs every single day. It cannot be stressed enough that they are one and the same. And I think that now, like, this whole bit about endorsements and contributions, right, is really coming to light. If you are really truly, independent and you want an objective investigation, right, then why not function as though you're objective and independent? And why should it matter to you, right? I think that we are putting undue pressure on the police. I need everybody to kind of understand here. They only have to get probable cause to make an arrest, right? Or they have to have reasonable suspicion to detain you, which means it's just very slight evidence. You have to have proof beyond a reasonable doubt. You go to trial, they need, some sort of evidence under the law to be able to hold that. The police, usually, here's the mentality that I encounter with retired officers who are my investigators, is like, whatever. Whatever, let me write the complaint and let me just pass the buck down the road. And so you're processed in the system like a number, and they're like, we don't have time to sort it out. Like, we don't have the time to sort it out. So we file it and then let the system sort it out as it may. Or if it's between a he said, she said, write it up, type it up, and then just be on your way. And that's the mentality. And I get it, because they're in a situation where they have to move faster than others. So although I applaud Aaron Ford, the piece of prosecutorial misconduct and the person who is not making it to the bench, thank God, I intend to report to Aaron Ford. And if he says no to me, I intend to take it to DOJ. I will not stop. That is the level of what is happening in the Clark County District Attorney's Office. And with the upper echelons of management, this is not like some little newbie rogue person who's, out there. This is the culture in that office. And so, they need to start functioning in that way. And I don't think it's unreasonable for us to demand that they do independent investigations and they're not so tightly woven with the police. The prosecutor is supposed to be, their role is, according to the law and the way they were set up, a prosecutor is called what's the Minister of Justice. And that means that they are supposed to seek the truth and seek justice. And they have to maintain this very weird position where I'm going to prosecute and win a case, but I'm also going to, seek the truth. Well, what if they have to give me evidence that's going to make them lose? So that's so stupid. It's just, I'm going to just be blunt. It is asinine to think that that's the way it needs to be done. But I hope Aaron Ford does it, and I intend to reach out to him about some of the other issues that are tightly woven with this. And, I look forward to having some of those conversations. As far as the endorsements go, though, I'm over hearing, no offense to you, Howard, not like it's your argument, because it's a constitutional one. Yes, free speech imperative, right? That every organization can express themselves and their views. However, I want everybody to think about what it looks like on the federal level, because on the federal level, I practice in federal court too, it doesn't look as incestuous as it does in Clark County. On the federal level, like the FBI, right? Our president has, politicized them now, but that is not the history of this country. And it's not the history of that organization at least, I can say, at least with the CIA, the FBI and the DEA. They are not as, politicized. And there's a reason for that, right? So that way you can have true investigations. Like if I got in a case, I trust a federal investigation more than I do Metro over here, who's going to be out, writing their police report like it's a creative art writing project. So I don't think it's a lot to ask, and I don't know what the mechanism is that necessarily has quieted them, right? And they're not, some liberal organization, and, they like to keep it that way because we don't want to get involved. Like, our job is to solve crimes. Like, we don't care what you guys are doing. We're disinterested. Same for judges. They shouldn't be caring either. I mean, and they don't have the endorsement. I mean, they're allowed to express themselves, but you just make things so messy. And then it looks like you're talking out of both sides of your mouth when you really say, like, oh yeah, we want to build community policing. I'm not buying it for a second. Put your money where your mouth is, or take the money away and show me if you're really about like making substantial change. Like, are you focused on solving crimes and the way an investigation is conducted, rather than who you're going to curry favor with, so your cases aren't thrown out or tossed. And as to the body cam transparency, I cannot stress enough, every detective, if you are out dealing with the public, and especially if you're a homicide detective, you need to be wearing a body cam. It is horrendous and horrific that in this county, that homicide detectives can just go rogue and turn off, like they don't have to record, and they don't. And they hide behind the excuse all the time to say, oh, well, it's a bad dude and people are afraid of retaliation or whatever. Well, don't go post it on the internet. It's only coming to me, right? I mean, we're not going to be handing it out like, obviously I'm prohibited from distributing any sort of evidence outside of a case. And if you need to put a protective order in place, there's an NRS for that, and that never gets utilized. Then why aren't we doing that? I suggest that to judges. You would think I am speaking Chinese to them. They're like, wait, what? I mean, that's the level of, it's so foreign. Nobody ever says things like that. So there's a small handful of, criminal defense attorneys that go all out fighting some of these issues. So I think that, you guys are right on the money. It's transparency. I think that the main areas where we can gain traction is the release and dissemination of police personnel files. Take out all their stuff that's personal. I don't need to know that they're on FMLA because they had cancer or their wife did. Take out the personal stuff. Put the misconduct complaints in there. So that way, either I would prefer to have the prosecutor wholly removed from that process and to just make it a public database, right? Because then at least we know there's some sort of tracking mechanism. And right now, the state of the law in this jurisdiction is I have to go and say, can you go look at the file? Why? I don't want to. Well, why do I have to tell you my theory of the case? Like, my client told me something that happened or a comment that was made. I have a duty to protect that confidentiality. And without getting to it, I have to sacrifice one constitutional right over the other. That's improper. There's a huge problem there too. So a lot of these issues are super complex, but can be sorted out. Make yourself a truly independent investigating authority. Make yourself, judge, an unbiased judge that doesn't really, care about what the result is, that you're just engaged in an applicational analysis. Like, what is our law? What are the facts? Did you meet it? Boom, move on. That's the way this is supposed to work. But instead, we have emotion-driven judges that are making reflexive actions about who they're going to make angry with the decisions that they make. It is frightening that there is a senior judge in this jurisdiction who handles only homicides that I deal with all the time, that I won a suppression motion because of some horrible stuff that was done during an interview when I had a client being interrogated, and he was treated horribly. I mean, it couldn't be more suppressible, if that's a word, at all, ever. There's nothing, they violated his rights all day long. Because the detectives were sitting in the audience, he took it under advisement like a coward and didn't rule from the bench right there. He issued what's called a minute order later on saying that I win, because he didn't want to make them mad because they were sitting there in his face. So That's the level of cowardice and corruption that we're dealing with. And it's important, these judges elections in this jurisdiction, as long as they exist, are probably some of the most critical times for all of you guys to be voting, and when you are 18 to vote and to make yourselves informed. So I can't stress that enough. I don't know if I answered the question. I don't know if Skylar, if it was, what was the last part of it that you asked?
I think that was Sanaya, and she asked, how do we mount a fight with equal force?
Upon police officers having prior complaints like Derek Chauvin had when he had 8.
Yeah, okay, so Chauvin, let me kind of just break that down for a little bit. And I know if you guys gotta go, I get it too, because I know Rico said there's a ton of questions, but I'm happy to stay and talk because it's so important. So one of the things that's critical is identifying and looking at that. Like, it's a great case study in where the disparities lie. There are some things that are specific to Minnesota because there's state law that's applying there. And then there are some things that are going to be specific to our jurisdiction. I can tell you we're behind the curve on everything. We are not a progressive state. We might as well be Alabama. And so I can say undoubtedly that we're not doing enough. And what happened with Chauvin, I can kind of predict it because this is what I see all the time. This happens. If my client were to say to me, say I represented Mr. Floyd and he didn't pass that day, what would happen is he would say, they beat the shit out of me, Adrian. Sorry, excuse my language. I have horrible body mouth. But they would say, he beat the shit out of me, and, he did this, that, and the other. I couldn't breathe. And so immediately I would send my investigator down to the jail to take photographs of him. Why? Because I have to make this bullshit showing of proof. That is ridiculous. Why isn't an average citizen believed over an officer, right? And so the average citizen is like relegated to this like person who's not credible. And that comes from, the mentality and the internal dynamics of power and authority that we can get into is a whole nother topic for another time. But with Chauvin, essentially what transpired is he was probably written up, but if I had asked for that file, what would have happened would be, first of all, Mr. Floyd would never be able to make a complaint because he'd be in custody. And if I had to make that complaint for him to internal affairs, it'd be through me, right? And they don't like dealing with criminal defense attorneys because things start to get really weird really quickly. So if I go to court and I say, Judge, they beat up my client, here's the photos, I want you to look into his file. Oh, police brutality. Oh, Miss Lobo, are you sure Mr. Floyd wasn't getting rowdy back with them, and those injuries were only sustained to subdue him and to he wasn't being too violent with officers? That's what we need. That's the default position from which their brain operates. And so essentially what happens then is I can't get the file. There's no way. So the prosecutor isn't going to just come into court and hand it to me. First of all, in Clark County, they won't even go look. They won't look. And if they do look, we experience this. And I don't even want them to look because I don't trust them because the relationship has been so damaged. I want a database, or I would like for Metro to function as an objective agency that investigates crime and to say, oh, here's a legal lawful subpoena. I'm going to hand deliver or, mail this to you, Ms. Lobo, because you requested this information, right? That's the way it should happen. However, what actually happens is they say your subpoena wasn't lawful and I'm not going to give it to you. And then they get on the phone with the DA, they tattle to the DA and they say, oh, why is this, defense attorney being, such a B? And, that's the way that this all plays out in the courtroom. And so if the laws aren't changed in order to access that, or first of all, if they're not even collecting the data, there's nothing to put in the database. So it's like data collection, then making sure it gets there, and then making sure that it's accessible and that they're not obstructing it on the other side and that the DA's hand is taken out of it. Like, what business do you care? I mean, here's the thing, right? Are we all not interested in the truth? Like, it always comes back to that for me, because if you did your job correctly, what are you so afraid of? And so those are the things that at least I can see with Chauvin's case, like where if an attorney asks,
Just to give you a heads up, we've got like a couple minutes left, so I know we wanted to ask a couple more questions on some of like your aspirations and how you got to like becoming an attorney. So if we can limit like the responses just to a little bit, that way we have all these other Instagram questions that we can put in there.
Okay. All right. So I will finish up with that. I mean, it's a long, convoluted answer. I hope that I at least answered those for you, but I will say that more needs to be done and can be done, and so many pieces to put the implementation in effect, because as Howard said, we can write the laws, but enforcing them is a whole nother, piece of this puzzle that has to come into play. But it's the first step, and we're doing that right now. So I'll hand it back over to our moderators.
Yes, so thank you for that. So like Rico said, we'd like to limit our your answers to anywhere between 2 and 4 minutes so that we can get through all of our questions. So this next one will be for you, Howard. So one of our questions was, if I want to support a bill, what steps will I need to take to ensure I do my part so that the bill I support becomes law?
That's a great question. And, I just want to take a really quick stab at civic participation in general. Voting is so critical, and learning about the candidates, and don't just go to like the candidates' websites, but get other information as well, so that you can kind of learn what people's records are, what their backgrounds are, what they stand for. Voting for judges, there are going to be a lot of judges on our ballot this November. And I think we have more information available now from some of the news outlets than has ever been available. And we have folks like Adrian who work in the legal community. There's people that have kind of hands-on experience that can help give us education about making those choices. So one of the first things is we've got to elect people that are passionate about these issues, that are willing to bring them forward. In terms of bills, if somebody already has a plan to introduce that piece of legislation, that's fantastic. But there's never a bad time to reach out to learn who your representatives are and reach out to them. Any good representative, in my opinion, will direct you to the right place. So you can start anywhere. So I have people that reach out to me, and sometimes the issue is not a state issue. It's a county or city issue, or it's a federal issue. But I don't just say, go here. I connect them with somebody in that office so to make sure that they're being heard and that their issues being addressed. So I would just encourage you to reach out. I know legislators in particular are, we have our emails are publicly listed on the legislature's website. So you can just look it up, and it emails, and it doesn't go to a staff member, it goes to me. And I check it every day. So, and then, for example, at the state level, we meet usually every other year. So we won't meet until February of next year, unless something else comes up, which might. And, again, there's a whole process where bills go through, they get scheduled for hearings, and that's really a huge opportunity. That is the opportunity for people to come and speak to legislators directly and make their voices heard about why they support an issue. And what I'll say is personal stories and personal contact means so much. I'm getting right now, I'm getting some emails that all are asking for the same thing with similar language. And that's great to raise the profile of an issue. But the things that really persuade people and change hearts and minds are personal stories, and words that you can tell have come from somebody's heart. So, I think that's what you can do is, for the sake of time, just learn who your representatives are, reach out to them, make sure that they know that you care about something. And again, anybody that is truly passionate is going to make sure that they let you know about those opportunities. But all those bills come up for public hearings, and I think it's really important that more people speak out, because the police and the legal community, they're going to speak out on it, but we really need to hear from affected people. And it's tough because a lot of those hearings are happening during work hours. They happen one time. One thing that's good about what's going on right now is hopefully it's going to expand the options for people to participate so that they don't have to show up in person. You can always send in letters and things like that, but that's how you can make your voice heard.
Thank you. And for Ms. Lobo, one questioner asked that in the United States, women of color are more underrepresented in the legal profession. For example, in private practice firms, women make up just 4% of managing partners in the biggest 200 firms here. So as a woman of color, what advice would you give to an aspiring attorney who wants to blaze a path like you did?
It is absolutely doable, and it's slowly changing. But let's not be, be kidding myself to say that this isn't very much, a good old boy state. And I find myself in rooms where I'm the only woman or I'm the only person of color in the room quite often and quite frequently in this jurisdiction. I think that it's a little bit different if you're in a bigger metropolitan area such as LA or New York or even Chicago, where you've got just more ethnic diversity and a more educated ethnic group. But here it's not as diverse as it could be, should be, and the people in power necessarily aren't, they don't look like me, not that many of them. And so we are making progress, but there's much to be done, and it's possible and doable. And if you have an aspiration for this work, it is extremely hard, but so extremely rewarding. I mean, you can tell this is obviously like passion for me. This is my life's, and so I'm doing this because I feel like it's my calling. I mean, it's definitely what I've been doing for this many years. So I believe in it, and I believe in helping people. And that's the reason I became an attorney and, criminal defense attorney at that. So I'll turn it back over to you guys now.
Thank you. I have one last question. So how is the Anytown program embedded in your professional and personal work today? So I'll start with you, Adrian.
I would say it's embedded in my work because I knew that I wanted to give a voice and advocate for change. And the reason I became an attorney is because I knew that how powerful law was, and what lawyers really do is I like to call them social engineers, right? We either write laws or advocate for laws, or we engage in arguments that put forward our client's position. So we're really kind of like the social architects, right, of the way policy is developed, the way that laws are written, interpreted. And so I love it. I'm a nerd, so I mean, I can geek out on this kind of stuff a lot, but I know it's not for everybody. And wherever you're at, that's the space where you need to serve from. This is obviously I feel this way and this strongly because it's been 14 years in the making. I can tell you, when I was in Anytown, I came back and I don't even know any camps. So there was a period of time, I didn't go through my whole lineage because it's been some time since I've said it out loud, but I went to camp when I was 16. I became an advisor, I became a counselor, I then went on to become a director. After that, I was in law school, and that's kind of when things started slowing down, obviously, because I was out of state, and I started focusing more on my studies. But I was involved in advocacy work before going to law school. So I worked for Shannon when she was at social service and at Clark County Social Service. And we used to do, ironically enough, right, this is how hardcore Anytown I am, is that there used to be an entity, it still exists, it's called the Neighborhood Justice Center. But the NJC's mission at that time was there was more programming focused around diversity training. And you got to realize we were coming off of like the back end of like the Rodney King riots, right? So there was big movement and momentum to, actually put diversity training in what's called as the post academy. That's the academy that police officers have to go through. And then also into the rookie school firefighters, and also in at-risk high areas, so like community centers or schools that were having a lot of racial problems, because that was happening back then. So I used to train police officers and firefighters in in diversity, right, and how to be more sensitive. Obviously it didn't work too well, no. Just kidding. But that's what I did. So it runs deep. It's kind of been threaded throughout every step of my career and my progress to where I am now. And in, I'd say, my day-to-day existence, in my day-to-day practice, it is the heart and soul of my practice. When I left the public defender's office, I was sad because obviously I missed the camaraderie and, just the synergy of being around, other colleagues. But I love the ability of owning my own business, because I didn't have to ask anybody except for me if I can come talk to you guys today. And I don't have to be careful about what I say because, oh wait, let me check with the boss. That's me. So I like having this freedom, but I also like having this creativity around it, right? And so I can make it a thing, an entity. And that's what I have done, is that my practice has become a being, an energetic force of, social justice and who I am. And that's threaded throughout my entire way I practice law, the way I speak to clients, even the way I speak to judges and DAs, in a respectful tone, but in an assertive tone, that we're not going to be putting up with this for much longer. Everybody is at the end of their rope. And I can tell you, just this is a little side extra tidbit, I've been in court since the protests have been going on. Granted, it was in a Zoom setting like this. I haven't been physically down in the courthouse. Some of my colleagues have been down there, but I can say they don't really care. And they think that that's a one-off, what's happening in other jurisdictions. They can, they have the mentality. And I brought up, transparency just this past week when I was arguing a discovery motion, and it was like I was talking to a wall, and I got the same old vanilla ruling, even though I, put in there the tenor of more transparency is needed. We need a ruling on the record, but we have in this jurisdiction judges who don't want to rule because they're afraid of what the police might do to them when it comes time for their reelection. So that's just an extra little tidbit. I thought if I'd throw it in there. So I think I answered that though.
Yes, definitely. So then I'll pose the question to you, Howard. How has Anytown been embedded in your professional and personal work?
That's a great question. I think ever since the first camp I did, it's really, I was trying to think about it and how to condense so many different things into kind of simple answers. And I think one of them is empathy. I think that's one of the huge things about camp is being able to relate to people that are different than I am, and to listen and try and understand where they're coming from and some of the common, struggles and pains and things that we all go through. So I try and bring that a lot into the work that I'm doing. And I think it's helpful both for kind of lifting up the voices of people that aren't often heard in some of these spaces, and also just not sticking to just my opinion and my side, and also reaching out to people who have very different opinions and making sure that they're included. And at the end of the day, we may completely disagree on an issue, but making sure that we're having that dialogue, because I think ultimately, again, when we talk about kind of like healing the community, we want to have a place where everyone is treated with dignity and respect. And I don't think that happens by even treating people that represent institutions that have a lot of problems by just pushing them away. So that's one thing. And then equity, I think, is the other big thing that comes out of my experience from camp. And having that experience with the systems of oppression and the different levels of prejudice and discrimination, and realizing how they build on and interact with each other has been key. And I try and center that in a lot of the work that I'm doing, and think about how and prioritize when I'm working on issues that they do something to close some of those barriers and improve some of those systems so that they're more fair for everyone. And again, that also goes back to just seeking out other voices and making sure that a diverse group of people is being heard and is being brought to the table, and is being engaged, and trying to get as many people engaged in the process as possible, so that we have solutions that really work for everybody, and not just the small group of people that are normally involved. So that's really how it's affected me as an elected official. But yeah, I mean, I also really try and reach out to the community and hear from what people are going through, and then bring that to the legislature and to everything that I do.
Thank you so much, Howard, for that. I just want to say thank you to our moderators for being so willing to take on this role, especially given the fact that oftentimes young people are labeled as, too young, too naive, too inexperienced. So thank you all so much for being so willing to take on this role. I'd love to pose one final question to the both of you before we wrap up. And Howard, I know you have a legislative call at 6. So I don't think they'll be too happy with you arriving late. So I perhaps if you want to go first, because I know you have to jet off. But when I was talking to folks, not just young folks, but folks within the community that cared about what's going on right now, I was pitching them this sort of like notion that we need to go beyond protesting. We need to go beyond resharing, retweeting, right? So could the both of you share 3 things that a person can do that doesn't involve protesting or retweeting, resharing, that they can do right now? Adrian, I know you mentioned you had some things that you wanted to share in our phone call last time we spoke. So I'd love to hear those 3 things that folks can do right now to kind of begin using I would say, like, to begin gaining traction on some of these issues. Howard, we'd love to kind of hear your thoughts, and then move on to Adrian.
All right, great. Thanks. That's a great question, Rico. And there's a lot of things that can be done, but thinking about the moment that we're in right now and where we're headed, at least from my perspective as a state lawmaker, the first thing is to learn who your representatives are and to reach out to them. Like I said, you can do this anytime, no matter what's going on. And there are going to be issues that are going to be at the state level, they're going to be at the local level, and there's going to be some stuff at the federal level too. So I would say making sure that, and you don't have to be an expert. You don't have to say, I want this exact law changed this way. If you do that research and you have ideas, feel free to share them. But even just saying, hey, I want you to know I've been following this. I'm extremely concerned about this issue. I want you to address this problem. Or what are you doing? What are your plans to address this problem? I think would be a great way to start. So I think that's one of the first things is contact the people that represent you, that have some decision-making authority, and ask them what they plan to do, and ask them what their role is in making this change in our community. The second thing that we can do, we just had a primary election yesterday. We have a general election in November. Learn about the candidates and vote, and vote on everything. We've got a ton of judges coming up. We're going to have ballot questions on different issues. There's all kinds of different things that can impact the community. So I know I said kind of both of these things before, but I just want to reiterate. Make sure that you get educated and exercise your right to vote in the upcoming elections, because especially on these issues, this is going to be huge. And 2 years from now, we're going to have a midterm election where there's going to be the sheriff will be up for election, the district attorney will be up for election, the attorney general will be up for re-election. So just stay engaged in that process. And then third thing I would say is actually take that engagement to the next level and show up and participate in the democratic process. You can go to the county commission meetings, you can go to the city council meetings. The county commission, I think, is meeting next week. They were looking at doing this ban on backpacks and other items during protests, and they tabled it, but they might bring it back up. So you could go and speak out on that if you're available and make your voice heard. One of the things that I saw Rico in Carson City last year, and he was working with some other leaders in the community to help bring people up to Carson City to meet legislators and to talk about issues that they cared about. There are several organizations that work on doing that help provide the transportation and all the logistics so that you can come up and experience that and maybe decide if that's something that you want to do. There's a lot of different careers in government outside of just being a lawmaker. And at the very least, I think it will open your eyes to kind of how the process works. And no matter what you do, you'll know how to be engaged and how to reach out and be involved moving forward. So those would be the three things I'd say. Learn who your reps are, reach out to them right now and ask them what they're doing on this situation, get educated and vote, and then try and find ways when you can, when your schedule allows, to go and be a participant in the process and see it for yourself firsthand.
Thank you both for answering our questions and for your time here today.
Adrian, can you answer that last one?
Sure, yeah. And I have a quick question before Howard gets off the phone. You had mentioned earlier, Howard, about your emails go directly to you. Is that the case, at least like for your peers, for others in the legislature, or do they use their staff members to filter questions or emails?
That's a great question. Responsiveness varies, but we don't have staff. So our emails go straight to us, and that's for every member of the legislature. For other branches of government, it can be a lot harder to find the direct emails to elected officials, and you usually do have to email their staff. But without going into a whole thing on the problems of the current legislative structure, one of the benefits is the emails go straight to us.
Okay. All right, cool. And then I did have another question for you. I would like to connect with you after this and find out the pieces of Tyrone Thompson's bill, AB 236, or whatever the number was on it, to be implemented. Because I like to see the things not get included in that. And is it possible for you to get us a copy of that? Because I would like to know what didn't get through.
Yeah, I'm glad to follow up with you and get you that information.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, and then to answer what you guys all can do, Howard hit a lot of them. The most important thing, I think, is before you can engage in any sort of activism is really making sure you take care of you. I think the most critical thing for sustaining, I mean, this is going to be an easy cluster to travel. This is going to take time, patience, methodical, hard work that is diligent, but so passionate and so worth it. But you're going to need to, be able to sustain that. So making sure that you take care of yourself. If you are going out to protest, that I wish that if there was The people who want to do it, great, fantastic. I think that they can, but everybody's gifts don't lie in that area. The noise is valuable though. Like, don't discount that, because this noise across the country has certainly got way more done and more emergency sessions legislature convened in many jurisdictions than would traditionally be done. So I think it's valuable, but take care of yourself, pace yourself, rest. It's easy to get emotionally fatigued and exhausted and to get depressed, because this is hard and heavy. And, my best friend had said to me, I can't believe you're still dealing with this. Like, when is this going to be over? Like, I can't believe that this issue is still here, right? And there's no way to like educate or rise up out of it, right? This is problems that exist. So it's not upon you guys to own that burden of. So make sure that like you're taking time for yourself to like kind of expel the trauma, whether it's exercising, praying, meditating, talking to your friends, whatever it is that you do that, fills you up emotionally and mentally, because you're going to need those things. Because this is definitely a long haul, a marathon. So that's first and foremost. And then engaging in other ways besides the protest. So I had suggested a letter writing campaign. That's super specific. You want to do those things. I'm happy to provide information. You don't have to be an expert. Good enough if you just want to send something to, your representatives in the legislature. If you want to send letters to the sheriff or to the Clark County District Attorney, if you want to blitz them with things like that, there can be a strategic, coordinated, I hate to say the word attack, but approach to kind of saying, hey, we're here. We'd like to talk about these things. And, they've never had to listen to us. That's why they don't invite us into those circles, or it's wanted, right? Because we've never had that force and power, which is like the best metaphor for what we're seeing happening, right? Is that we're seeing people whose voices have been squelched now are being heard finally. And so hopefully that tone will change, but it's very difficult for them to work collaboratively with somebody such as myself, because they feel like, well, why should I have to? Because I've never had to. Right. And so it's like this arrogance almost that I mean, but I'm open to those things. Like, not everything needs to be in litigation in court. I wish that I could pick up the phone and speak frankly with somebody, but frankly, that's not the way that things are done. And when you've been burned with evidence hidden or destroyed, I don't really have anything to say. Like, I just need to litigate this all the way to our state Supreme Court to get a favorable ruling, unfortunately. Because then justice is delayed and denied. So tangent, side speech, but one of the things, letter blitz. So I think that we can do that. You don't have to know everything. Use me, use Howard, use Rico. If I we'll go find the answers together, or the appropriate person to answer the questions. So that's one piece of it. You don't have to expert, and I'm going to start doing like the form letters. And it can just be something that's simple. You don't have to actually write the law when you propose something to your legislature, or you don't have to necessarily like write it. I'm making it easy, understandable language. You can fill in specific things about yourself. We'll go through specifics on all that later, but letter writing campaigns. The other piece of it is requesting meetings. Attach yourself to other organizations that are aligned with your mission. Like, obviously off the top of my head, the NAACP. I mean, aligning yourself with the ACLU, asking, how can we collaborate together? We're thinking about doing like this sort of, letter writing campaign, would you like to participate? Those sorts of things that are going to draw more attention, so you can garner the numbers and make your voices louder. So that way, when it's not just like one that, somebody reads or an email and it's gone, it's that there's like stacks and they're just pouring and pouring in. And so you're giving yourself, more opportunities to leverage those things. So that's one. I think it's also important to request those in-person meetings, or to go in person, as Howard was saying, and hopefully as things like ease up, we'll be able to do more of that. If not, then for sure you want to make sure that, I don't know if they're doing anything like via Zoom or dropping like a public link on websites where essentially we can watch like committee hearings or that. So that way, you know, even if we can't physically be there in person, or if you're, you know, somebody who obviously has a compromised immune system, you don't want to go out, but citizen would like to offer comment or story, you need to be there and having your voices heard. And, you know, that's the level of engagement that is going to create the change that we're so direly needing. I definitely think that it's possible, it's capable, it's not outside of the realm of possibility. And if we don't dream it or speak it out loud, then it never comes to pass. And we aren't sitting around and, you know, passively going to wait on others to do things for us. I think that's the lesson learned from all of like this turmoil that we've been in. So engage, attach, self-care, and, you know, we'll provide as much information as we can. And, you know, I'm always happy to answer questions and do panels and interviews and educate people. So much of being an attorney is educating my clients, the courts sometimes, and other attorneys on like what the law is and what you can do to change something like that, or what you should do, offering suggestions, being creative, thinking outside the box. You know, say the bold things, because you say, I want to do away with the entire discovery system because I think it's based, you know, it's rooted in slavery, because this was like the black side of the system. If you don't ever say that, it never happens, you know? So say the things, dream the big dreams, have big vision. We need that now more than ever.
Thank you, Adrian. Appreciate you so
Of course.
much. I know
Of
Howard
course.
just had to leave for a legislative phone call, Zoom call actually, so he had to jet off. But I just want to thank you, Adrian, for your input, your knowledge. I hope this is one of many conversations that we have as far as exploring the criminal justice system. And we look forward to figuring out, you know, what that next step is for, at least for us on our end, and developing a letter writing campaign and figuring out ways that we can invoke real change here in Las Vegas. Thank you to our moderators for you know, leading us in this conversation. We can't wait to uplift you in other spaces. And for everyone that tuned in, thank you all so much. We are coming to a close for this virtual town hall. This recording will be available for everyone in just a few hours once it's sent to me via email. And once it is, I'll make sure to share it with everyone, and we'll put it up somewhere on our website. But in the meantime, thank you all so much for joining, and be on the lookout for that next Anytown Connect. Thank you, Adrian.
Thank you so much, Rico, for having me. Thank you, you guys. It was a pleasure meeting you all, and I can't wait to work with you.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.